Hi, well, we're going to hear a presentation today about star voting, and I'm going to turn it over to our presenter to introduce herself and get started.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Wolk, and I'm the executive director of the Equal Vote Coalition. So we're an Oregon-based national nonpartisan nonprofit working on fighting for true equality in the vote itself. So our mission is that we support reforms that help ensure that my vote is just as powerful as your vote, no matter who I am, where I am, how I affiliate, or how many candidates I have running on my side. So, and then on a more personal note, I'm really excited to be presenting to this group. Me and my mom actually founded an Indivisible chapter for Northeast Portland back in, I think, 2016. And we ended up getting kind of folded into other groups and coalitioning with the group that ended up becoming my group that I'm with now. So I think we're maybe distant cousins, or not that distant. But yeah, I'm based in Eugene, Oregon from Portland, and have been working on star voting for the last going on 8 years, and came to that from ranked choice voting as a background. So ranked choice voting, star voting, they're all different types of preference voting, and they have a lot in common, but there are real differences, and definitely real differences with our current system as well. So I will pull up some slides and get going. There we go. Can you all see that? So we're all familiar with the current system. It's kind of the basic paradigm that most of us learned to vote under, and most of us still use here in Oregon. We call it choose one only voting. It's also known as plurality voting, or first past the post. But it's really characterized by this choose one only ballot, where you vote for one candidate, even if there's 10 or 20 different options. And if your favorite doesn't seem electable, you might be asking yourself a strategic question there, where you're like, should I be voting lesser evil? Is it safe to vote for my favorite? Because there are really strong incentives to do everything you can to prevent your worst case scenario from winning. And that really comes down to a problem called vote splitting, otherwise known as the spoiler effect. So we have a classic nonpartisan Star Wars example here for you. And the way vote splitting works is, well, the thing is, the current system works fine if there are only 2 candidates in the race. But in competitive races, vote splitting can leave majority coalitions divided and conquered, allowing a candidate who's opposed by the majority to win. So as we see on the slide, we've got a 60-40 simple example, 2 candidates, Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. Luke Skywalker wins easily. But what happens if Luke and Leia both decide to run for office? After all, it was her idea, she had the blueprints, and I think she would make a fantastic leader. All of a sudden, the majority coalition, instead of being stronger for having a bigger coalition, they're actually divided, because voters have to strategically vote for one or the other of them if they don't want to be split and then have Darth Vader able to win with just 40%. So vote splitting happens all the time in our current system. The more candidates are in the race, the more likely it is to happen. And the less clear it is who the front runners are, the more likely it is to happen, because voters can't effectively navigate to kind of prevent this kind of vote splitting from electing a candidate who's in many cases opposed by the majority. So we have a number of band-aids in our current system that fix this. The primary is a big one. So what we do is we'll have multiple elections to help narrow it down, because our current system really gets dramatically worse if there's more candidates in the race. But there are disadvantages to having primaries as well. Candidates have to fundraise twice, working class people can't necessarily afford to run a year-long hiring process to get a job, especially for a local office that's not always well paid. And so you get a lot of disparities in representation that are made worse by the primary, even though the primary does make the actual vote counting more accurate. So the question is really, is there a better way to do it? There we go. So Equal Vote Coalition has 5 pillars of what we look for in a voting method. And these are kind of umbrellas or values. And first off, our current system does a great job at this first criteria. It's simple. And we do want our voting method to be simple. It should be easy to vote. It should be easy to understand the results, transparent, easy to tally, easy to implement, and easy to audit. But we'd also like to be able to be honest as voters. So it should be safe to vote your conscience, incentivize good voting behavior. And then in terms of what is good voting behavior, if we have a more expressive voting method that lets you show more than just one, we need it to be expressive. So voters need to be able to express their full opinion. And then that added data on our ballots helps us find more accurate winners. So more accurate representation of the will of the people. So that's what an accuracy metric really means in terms of voting methods. And then last but not least, we want voting methods to be simple. So they should eliminate vote splitting. The system should not put some types of voters or candidates at an unfair advantage. And there are a few types of bias that are kind of built into different voting methods at times. So vote splitting is one example where the majority is ending up divided and conquered. You're at a disadvantage if you have more candidates on your side. But some voting methods are also more or less polarizing by definition. Vote splitting kind of inherently favors more polarizing edge candidates and hurts candidates in the middle ideologically of the pack of other candidates by making them compete with people from both sides. So polarizing bias is another thing that we really want to get rid of. And electability bias is a third one where you're strategically voting for the front runner you think can win. So there are a few types of voting methods that were on that chart before, but our focus here is the voting method that we recommend, and star voting is its name. So star voting is super simple. You score your candidates 5 stars best, 0 stars worst, and then vote your conscience. For voters, that's basically all you need to know in order to do it correctly and get great results. The instructions are going to be right on the ballot, especially for jurisdictions like Eugene, Oregon, that are looking to adopt this on May 21st, for starters. But you just give your favorite candidate 5 stars. So this voter gave Andre 5 stars. You give your last choice 0, or you leave them blank. So if you are a traditional person and you just want to vote for your favorite and move on with your life, you can just give your favorite 5 stars and leave everybody else blank. But if you have a more nuanced opinion with star voting, you can absolutely do that. So 4 stars is a pretty great candidate too. And this voter decided to give both Carmen and David 4 stars. They gave Aaron 1 star, just showing that Aaron's a little bit better than Blake, but still really not a candidate that they want. It's better than their worst case scenario. And then star voting's counted in 2 steps, both of which are addition. So in the scoring round, the 2 highest scoring candidates are finalists. So you add up all the scores from all the ballots, you find the 2 highest scoring overall, and those candidates advance to the next round. So in this case, we're going to advance Carmen and Blake. Those are our finalists. They go to the automatic runoff. And then in this runoff, you don't have to vote again. Your ballot already shows who you prefer between these 2. So in the runoff, your ballot counts as 1 vote. For the finalist, you scored higher. In this case, this voter scored Carmen 4 stars, Blake 1 star, so their vote goes to Carmen, and that's their full vote, just like a normal vote. So star voting is actually an acronym, stands for score then automatic runoff, and that is exactly how it works. In the first round, you're adding up stars. In the second round, you're adding up votes, and one voter equals one vote. And the finalist with the most votes wins. So in this example, Carmen wins with 63%, Blake wins with 37%. And in some cases, you may have some voters who gave equal preference to both finalists. So if you score them both 4 stars and then your 4-star candidates are both finalists, that would be counted as an equal preference. So it is counted, but your vote just doesn't really swing the outcome one way or the other because you like them the same. And results are pretty familiar and transparent as well. With star voting, you're able to start showing preliminary results right on election day. You're able to have precinct level results, or, with 25% of ballots counted, it looks like Justin and Jim are in the lead. So in the ways that we're used to getting election night results, star voting really delivers a familiar format. The only difference is you've got one column that shows total score. So you've got the total score for each candidate. And then another column that shows the runoff votes. So that's how many voters preferred each finalist. And in this other example, which is a real world example for a party primary nomination poll, it was 55 to 45. So Eugene is really the spearhead of the star voting movement. Star voting was invented in Eugene back in 2014. The Equal Vote hosted an election reform conference, brought in experts and representatives from all of the leading national organizations working on voting method reform. And star voting kind of came out of that as a hybrid proposal that kind of delivers on the goals of the different previous factions while addressing some of the valid concerns with the older proposals. And the star voting for Eugene measure would do 2 things. First off, it would make star voting the default voting method for all City of Eugene elections. So that's mayor, city council, and EWEB. It would also eliminate the primary for those city offices. So candidates would only need to run in one election. And that is different from our current system. For most Oregon local elections right now, the system is a conditional runoff. So candidates run for the May primary, all the candidates, it's nonpartisan, everyone runs in kind of one race together. And then if one candidate has a majority, the election's over and only one candidate will be on the general election ballot. But if nobody has a majority, then the top 2 will run off in November. So for a candidate, that current system is not only costly, it's really difficult. They have to plan for 2 elections potentially, even though they may only need to do one. They need to fundraise a ton of money for the primary, but not knowing if they're going to have to do it all again, they might want to save some of that money or not, or they might need to just fundraise it all again a second time if they do end up needing to do a second election. So again, that makes running for local offices much less accessible than it really could be. And then star voting has a really huge advantage in terms of logistics. Like I said, star voting's all just tallied with addition. So it's fully compatible with all of our current election protocols and mechanisms. It's compatible with vote by mail. It's compatible with nonpartisan primaries. It's compatible with partisan primaries. You can still have a primary if you want. You can do open primaries with the top 5. You can do it any number of ways, and that's fine. You can also do it with proportional representation, which I'm not really getting into in this presentation. But in terms of counting logistics, star voting has the advantage of all your ballot data is counted. And that's a huge advantage that is not to be taken for granted, because ranked choice voting, one of the issues with it that STAR corrects is that it does actually ignore a lot of rankings and sometimes ignores relevant rankings. Another thing about STAR voting that helps with the logistics is that early returns can be fully tallied. Precinct level results are available. Audits are absolutely simple. Whereas with ranked choice voting, ranked choice, for those of you who don't know, is where you are ranking your candidates first choice, second choice, third choice. You count all the top choice rankings in a round, and then you eliminate the last place candidate and transfer those voters' votes to their next choice. And then you repeat that in rounds, but depending on the order of elimination, when your vote goes to transfer, your next choice may have already been eliminated. So in close competitive races, it can have some real glitchy, counterintuitive results there. And because you're not counting all of that ballot data and you're counting it in rounds with ranked choice, you aren't able to know who is going to be eliminated until you have all of the ballots in hand from everywhere. So states that have adopted ranked choice, like Alaska and Maine, they physically have to truck all of the ballots to a central location, which compromises election security and also is just a huge logistical nightmare that takes weeks. So they're not usually able to start counting the different rounds of elimination until weeks after election day. And so this is where I'm getting a little bit wonky. So I apologize in advance for those of you who are not policy wonks, but hopefully you're all here today because you are. STAR voting's been peer reviewed, and it's been included in a number of studies that look at election accuracy and also strategic resiliency. And in every single study that it's been included in, STAR voting has really topped the charts in terms of both electing accurate representative winners and combating strategic voting incentives. So that incentive to vote less or evil again. So our current system is at the bottom of this chart by the "you are here." That's plurality voting, choose one. And if voters aren't on it or aren't strategic, this black dot represents honest voter outcomes. And it's about 70% accurate. So that's really a dumpster fire, as many of us are experiencing with our political experience, and that's why. So we get inaccurate outcomes close to 30% of the time, unless voters strategically vote for the front runner on their side. And while that hurts and leaves a bad taste in our mouth and hurts voter turnout and just leads to widespread disillusionment, strategic voting with our current system does make the outcomes a lot better. And that's like plurality top two, or plurality like we would do in our partisan races, where we have multiple candidates, one from each party, go to the general. But combined with a top two runoff, like we do for our local elections, our current system's actually not the worst. It's the second worst. Instant runoff voting here is otherwise known as ranked choice voting, and it does get some improvement over the top two system. So it's a little better, but it's not as much better as we would expect. And again, that's because they're not actually counting all of those rankings. It feels more expressive. Voters get a really positive experience with getting to show their preference order. But if most of those preferences aren't counted, especially in the close competitive races where it matters, it doesn't do as much as we would like to make the results better. And then STAR voting is not the only top tier voting method. Approval voting is a super simple option that also gets really good results, especially when combined with a top two general. And then Smith min-max here is the wonky way of saying better ranked voting. So you can do ranked voting better. It's just a little more complicated, but STAR voting really tops the charts. And that's why we recommend it. So to loop back, here we've got kind of our top most well-known voting methods on this Venn diagram flower. And star voting is quite simple. It empowers voter honesty. It really strongly incentivizes voters to follow the instructions, which are, again, to give your favorite 5 stars, give your last choice 0 or leave them blank, and then show your preference order between the other candidates, scoring as desired. Star voting is very expressive. A 5-star ballot is just very flexible for the voter. So like I said, if you want to be traditional, you can give your favorite 5 stars, leave everybody else blank. If you really like ranking things, you can actually show your full preference order on a star ballot. So 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, 1 star, 0. And you can also show how much or how little you like your candidates. So with star voting, if your second choice is really fantastic, you can give them 5 stars as well, or give them 4 stars. So you can show if you really, really love your second choice. And you can also show if your second choice is almost as bad as your worst case scenario, you can give them 1 star. Whereas if that was just a simple first choice, second choice, third choice ranking, there'd be no way for the ballot to be able to tell, is your second choice somebody you even support, or is it somebody that you don't support? And all of that is a big part of why we get such accurate results with star voting, and why we get an equal vote. So a big part of mathematically what it means to have an equal vote is that we need to be able to show that we prefer all the candidates on our side over the candidates we really dislike. So no matter how many candidates there are, it's important for me to be able to show that I prefer my coalition over candidates that aren't in my coalition. And ranked choice, which I should have done a quick show of hands just to check in with my audience here. How many of you have heard of ranked choice voting before this presentation? Awesome. And of your viewers who aren't here today but might be watching the video, would you guys say that most people are pretty familiar with it or kind of familiar?
Well, to be fair, sorry, there's a little bug flying around here. To be fair, we had a presentation by the group that is, behind the ballot measure for ranked choice voting back before our legislative session started. And, they were asking for an endorsement from COIN. And we said, well, we wanted to hear from Star Voting, before we made any decisions. So we have had a presentation already about ranked choice voting. So
Okay.
I think everyone in the group is somewhat familiar anyway with ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
And that's why we wanted to record this, because we want to make sure everybody had a chance to see it.
Yeah, and what we find is that most advocates for voting reforms, all reforms, found out about ranked choice voting first, and it has a really fantastic pitch. So we like preference voting. We like that preference voting empowers you to be less strategic. And we like that with ranked choice, whether or not your favorite can win, your vote goes to your next choice and can make a difference. But part of why we don't support ranked choice voting as the proposal anymore is because it does oversell itself. There are millions and millions of dollars being spent every year to lobby for ranked choice voting, including out-of-state groups. And Nevada, for example, spent 21 million or $23 million last cycle to win the first round with ranked choice voting, and now are geared up to do that again before it's official. So we do really encourage groups to be careful before endorsing ranked choice voting. What we've seen over and over is that research committees that do a deeper dive recommend star voting or other options. But then committees that aren't doing as deep a dive are like, wow, ranked choice sounds fantastic. I love it. So I really encourage everyone to kick the tires and to also fact check your sources. on voting reform. As a brief aside, for instance, there are a lot of Fair Vote attack articles out there, and Fair Vote's the biggest lobbyist for ranked choice voting in the country. They have a big article on why they don't support star voting, and if you scroll to the end, their citations are all older than star voting. So star voting is not included in a single one of their citations. They're not a good source. So I definitely encourage internet literacy and really put that to work for your voting method assessment that you guys are going to do. Don't just take it from me, actually check the sources and make sure they say what I'm saying they say. But to go back to the screen share, we've got pretty much to the end of it. We have a lot of endorsements for star voting. So we have a huge coalition. Equal Vote Coalition is, again, the nonprofit that's kind of behind this, but Equal Vote does support multiple voting methods. So we support ranked robin, which is better ranked voting, and we support approval voting, which is better traditional voting, essentially. And then we have a great team that's coming together to pull for star voting, especially here in Eugene. But we do also have a statewide ballot initiative that we launched well before the legislature recommended ranked choice voting. So hopefully we're going to see both of those go head to head in November, and voters will really have a good choice about what voting method they want to adopt. And to learn more, you can go to starvoting.org or equal.vote. That's the Equal Vote website or the Star Voting website. If you want to try out star voting yourself, star.vote is a great tool for simple polling. And if you go to starvoting.org/elections, there's more sophisticated things for if Indivisible or Coin ends up wanting to use star voting or use ranked choice in your own elections. And then I do have a ton more slides that answer frequently asked questions. So, but at that point, I think I should turn it to you guys to see what you want to know more about.
Go ahead and unmute yourselves. I muted everybody before the presentation started, but go ahead and unmute yourselves and then just go ahead and ask your questions.
Sure.
Rebecca, go ahead and start.
Thank you, Sarah, for coming today. The question I have is, you know, my concern is, how are we supposed to get past the fears about adopting a new voting process? And, you know, that I think it's great that Eugene is, you know, kind of leading the charge, and we'll, you know, be able to take them as an example and follow, you know, how that's going. And that would really have some good anecdotal stories that may, you know, persuade others. But, you know, doing in a very volatile time in terms of election assurances that, you know, elections are running smoothly, you know, this is I would like to say that I am leaning towards approving this, because I really feel like if not now, when? You know, it's like if something's better, why wait, you know? But what have you come up with any anything that, and also you could share with us later, you know, little sound bites about how people are approaching this issue with, you know, resistance to adopting something new?
Yeah, I think fear of the unknown is the biggest reason that people don't support star voting. And then unfortunately, once people do start to learn more, they realize this is a pretty big field, voting reform, and there are a lot of proposals out there. So it is a little tricky, and I think we really need groups like yours to step up and really do that deeper dive so that you can give good recommendations. But when we go door to door, what we find is that voters across the board, regardless of political affiliation, are really, really fed up with politics, if they vote at all. We actually find a lot of voters who say, you know, I actually stopped voting in recent years. I was an avid voter for years and years, and it's just so toxic. It's disgusting. We have the same candidates over and over. We have no real choices. Voting's not going to make a difference. It's not safe to vote my conscience. And instead of saying, I think for me, actually have some close friends who are non-voters, and I was badgering them about it for a long time and saying, you know, you should vote, it's your civic duty. And instead of using guilt, I think it's time for us to start using actually listening to these voters' valid concerns and saying, yeah, the current system is hyper polarized and it doesn't have to be. Yeah, it does inflate the influence of money in politics with this big electability thing where you need to vote for the front runner who can win, and that's solvable. So when we go door to door, we find that people who have a minute to think about it really start supporting voting reform, especially if it's not oversold, and especially if it doesn't come at the cost of the things we do like about our current system. So, and that's kind of where I got into these results details and logistical details. Ranked choice voting in places it's been adopted, in the last couple of years, we've had 2 huge results logistical failures. So New York City used it for the first time, and they accidentally added 135,000 test ballots. So that's fake ballots that they were using to test the system before the official election. And nobody caught the error. They just reported like first round results, second round results. We're now weeks after the election date. And the candidate in the lead was like, hey, we did exit polling. You're saying that you have more voters than actually voted at this polling place. And so they did a recheck, and they realized literally they had added 135,000 ranked choice test ballots to the count and not noticed, assuming good faith. But these kinds of errors are, you know, human error happens in every system. But ranked choice is so complicated on the back end that those kinds of errors are not transparent unless you really understand the system and how it's supposed to look. And if you're a really good programmer, you can read all the programming. So that's where, you know, again, star voting is just 2 rounds. It's just addition. It's compatible with all of our current checks and balances. And that's something that we shouldn't have to sacrifice if we do want to adopt a more expressive voting method. That doesn't have to mean it's way more complicated on the back end.
Can I just a follow up is you know, it'd be interesting to know what that process was with Eugene and how they actually were able to get a yes from the officials. And, you know, I don't expect you to answer that now, but, you know, I think that would be something to, like you say, you know, do background check and find out how they were successful in, you know, instituting that.
Yeah, and Eugene hasn't used star voting yet. Star voting's been used for the Independent Party of Oregon statewide primary. It was used by Democratic Party of Oregon for their presidential delegate elections for the Bernie and Hillary delegates. And it's been used by a number of political parties and groups for internal elections. But this will be our first municipal adoption. The reason we know how it's going to work is we've been in touch with the election vendors in Oregon for years talking about this. And with star voting, it's summable. So let's say we've got 1,000 boxes of ballots that have come in on election day. I can count the first box separately and get the totals just for that box. And then I can count the next box. So you can count ballots as they come in, just as we would do with the current system. Whereas with ranked choice, that's just physically impossible. And that is really where you can say, oh, you know, the box 1 is, you know, whatever total, and box 2 is whatever total. And if you add up those totals, it all adds up. With ranked choice, that kind of like basic math, doesn't work. You have to do algebra.
So that kind of leads to a question that I had, and that is that it's my understanding that the county clerks are really kind of opposing alternative forms of voting. and I know that's because they have a system in place, you know, partly anyway, they have a system in place. My understanding was that they've described basically all other kinds of voting as being too complex. Do you have a couple of questions? What kind of software is available? I mean, that would be the biggest thing. Is there good software available for this to happen now? And am I wrong about county clerk's position on star voting in particular?
Yeah. So, county clerks have the Association of County Clerks, which is all of the county clerks, and county clerks run our state or our county elections in each county. So they're the ones in charge of the nuts and bolts. And they've come out in strong opposition to ranked choice voting and also to the version of ranked choice voting, the proportional version that they're doing for city council in Portland, which is called single transferable vote. And that's basically based on the same ranked choice voting algorithm, but then again, another layer of complexity. And proportional representation, we do support it at Equal Vote Coalition. It's got a lot of great advantages. And I could speak to that in another meeting if you guys want to hear more about should we support proportional representation elections or single winner elections. But yeah, long story short, the clerks oppose those options. They don't oppose star voting at all. They don't oppose approval voting. I don't think there's ever been a statement to that effect. And Association of Clerks in other states have strongly supported some of these other options, including approval voting. So it's, yeah, definitely not all voting methods have these same logistical issues. It's really about, do you have to centralize all the ballots or not? And then
so-
I guess I'll just quickly to add the answer to your question. With star voting, it's just a software upgrade. So we wouldn't need to buy new hardware, even if it was adopted at the statewide level. You can have different election vendors in different counties, which is what we actually have. So we wouldn't need to replace any of the hardware. It's just a software upgrade and then a recertification that software is certified, which is something that we do periodically anyway. So minimal cost. The biggest cost logistically is voter education, which should be robust and inclusive, and we're committed to helping with that.
So just for clarification, so this has already been approved in Eugene? So Eugene will be using it in their upcoming local elections, is that correct? Or is it on a ballot in Eugene?
It's on the ballot. So
Okay.
collected all the signatures, voters will have a chance to adopt it, vote yes or no, hopefully yes. And that election is the May 21st election. So if they vote yes in May, we'll adopt star voting for all City of Eugene elections.
And then it is also you're saying that you're trying to get it on the ballot statewide in November. And so how are you doing on signature gathering?
We have a ton of signatures. We still need a lot more. So I would say it's still possible that we would make the November ballot. And what we're really hoping is that if we pass star voting in Eugene in May, that'll catalyze a flood of funding and donations, because I think the biggest argument why not to support star voting is, one, fear of the unknown, but also fear of being first, which I understand. So we're really hoping that Eugene kind of helps catapult star voting onto a bigger platform, either for this statewide cycle or the next one.
So I'm not quite sure how this works, but because I think signature gathering has to be completed in early July. So if it's not completed, if you don't have enough 100 and some thousand signatures by early July, would you have to, I assume then that you would try again for the next cycle, which would be 2026? And you would start all over on signature gathering? Or, I mean, I guess my question is, how realistic is it that it's going to make it to the 2024 ballot? And, or are you thinking that, get it approved in Eugene, and then we use Eugene as an example to, really push for it in 2026? The problem with that being that we may have already voted on ranked choice voting in this year, in 2024, because that was a legislative referral.
Yeah, so we are definitely trying for 2024, and it's possible. Like I said, the ranked choice bill, if it does pass, doesn't go into effect for many more years.
See.
And it also, we don't believe it's constitutional, so we don't think it'll hold up in court. It has not held up in court in a number of other states, especially for statewide offices. Which actually may be why the ranked choice bill doesn't include statewide seats. It only includes local and federal. And then it leaves out actually the legislators who put forward the bill. Their seats would still use the current system. Whereas our statewide star voting proposal includes all offices. It would make star voting the default across the board. For partisan elections, you would use star voting in the primary, and then the top candidate from each party would advance to the general election. But for our local offices, it would be an optional primary. So jurisdictions could just skip it as the default, or if they want to have a primary, then the top 5 candidates would advance to the general election.
I have a question on the example that Debbie sent out in an email. It shows the voided ballots for ranked choice. Are you familiar with that slide?
Yeah.
And I can understand the errors there. On the star ballot situation, if somebody went and for Andre just checked everything there, how does that does he add up or end up with the total of all those and everybody else gets nothing? Or is there some way that the manner in which this would be filled out could void out that ballot?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So that's a great question and a common one. In ranked choice, as you can see here, there are a couple of different ways a voter can void their ballot. And what this means is like they've filled it out in a way that's honest, that expresses their opinion, but it just can't be counted because ranked choice can't handle if voters give 2 people first choice, or if there's skipped rankings, depending on the jurisdiction, that can and does void your ballot as well. So we've seen around the country that ranked choice increases voter error and ballots that can't be counted. And that does disproportionately affect some voters more than others. So lower income voters, voters of color, and voters who don't speak English as a first language are much more likely to accidentally mess up their ranked choice ballot and not have it be able to be counted, even if it does show the voter intent. Whereas with star voting, let's see here, a voter can absolutely give 2 candidates the same score, and that shows that they like those 2 candidates equally. And if, again, Carmen and David do make it to that automatic runoff, that vote would be counted as an equal preference vote. So it's counted, it shows that the voter preferred Carmen and David over Blake and Aaron, and that they actually liked Andre even better than that. And it does make a difference to get those candidates into the runoff or to prevent them from getting into the runoff, depending on what the score was. So it's fully counted. It makes a difference. It's just not showing a preference between those 2 candidates. So
once again, if Andre got if somebody checked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for Andre, that would not disqualify his vote, or I mean that ballot, excuse me.
If they gave 5, so if you give, there's some protocols for like determining voter intent for any voting method. If you scored all the bubbles, that is a voter error. But protocol that we recommend would be that would be counted for the highest score given. That's something where you could see somebody filling in like all 5 stars to mean 5 stars. So that would be counted as the top score. If the voter intent isn't clear, it is possible to void your star ballot too. There's just way less ways to do that. So it's super rare.
Sarah, this
Somebody
is
could fill
really,
in all the bubbles and that would obviously.
Yeah, I mean, you can draw a smiley face or a cat
Mhm.
on your ballot, or write a big FU and do a protest vote in any system. But yeah, it's almost impossible to accidentally void your star ballot.
this has been really helpful. Do either of you have one last question?
That was mine.
Thank you. And thank you for an excellent presentation as well. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.